They have a session after.
Oh, yeah, I know, Dr. Ali. I don't want to be in trouble with him. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys. I hope my lecture yesterday kind of clear for most of you. I would like to have some questions very quickly before I go for the cognition and the emotion lecture today, both of them at the same time, but both lectures, the cognition and the emotion, two things we're going to talk about today. It should be pretty much straightforward, inshallah, so make it simple as much as I can. So if I ask you the question, what type of memory is involved in learning how to ride a bicycle? What would you say? What type of memory is involved in learning how to drive a bicycle? Remember, I'm asking for the memory, like long-term memory, okay? So in your brain, okay, in your brain, what is the type of memory you stored how to ride a bike? You stored, not you. I'm not teaching you how to ride now. You have already learned how to ride a bike. So
is it working memory?
Who's talking? Sorry?
Is it working memory?
Is it working? Can you say your name? I cannot tell.
Ahmed Farhan.
Okay, Ahmed. Okay. So you're saying working memory. Let me ask the question. What kind of, when you want to learn how to ride in the beginning, what do you need? You have to be aware, of course, but which type of memory it will be stored eventually, as a skills or as a fact, an event, or
skilled, of course.
Priming skills. So if you want to talk about that, it's kind of procedural skills and habits, how to ride. So it's supposed to be implicit memory, correct? Make sense, guys? You stored how to ride the bicycle in your brain as a skills for that thing. So when you ride a bike, you will go ahead and directly ride it. You know already how to do it. It's not like the beginning of it. Okay? Make sense? And if I ask another question, in terms of, let's say, I want to give an example before we go ahead. We should not stay long time, so I don't take, but I usually like to give 5 minutes to talk about the previous lectures, just to highlight about important thing. For the type of the two types of memory, if you have a cell, if you do an experiment, and what would you expect to have higher number of synapses? Huh? The one has habituation, long-term habituation, long-term sensitization, or sensitization, or just like, let's say, low action potential, long-term depression. So I am distinguishing between sensitization and long-term sensitization, okay? And habituation and long-term habituation, because it can be persistent and stay for a long time, let's say. So if you are forming synapses between a sensory cell and a motor cell, and remember the Heb's rule, like A and B, when an A cell keeps firing persistent, strongly, and frequently to the B, you would expect a structural change, which was discovered by Eric Kandel, like I said, formation of the synapses, right? So we should say it's like most majority, you guys answered, long-term sensitization. Long-term habituation, it will have the opposite, depression. You're going to lose it, right? So just remember that. And if I ask, which one of the following, for example, is the non-associative in the explicit memory pathway? Which one we will talk about? Is it the Schaffer collateral pathway? Is it the Mossy fiber, or is it the direct? Which one of them? You guys remember? The one is non-associative because it's dependent not on the NMDA. You guys are Googling, huh? Or opening the lecture. Mossy, it's a Mossy fiber, right? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today's topic, we're gonna talk about the first part is the cognition. Okay, we go through the objectives very quick, and like I said, it's 2 topics in 1 lecture. So we're gonna mention the association cortex region and the cognition, the parallel pathway in each sensory, and what is the pathways. We're going to talk about the dorsal, the ventral for the association areas, the importance of the frontal loop, and actually there's also, if you want to call it accident or incident, a very famous one also, helped the neuroscience or the neuroscientist to figure out what is going on in the frontal lobe and what is the function of that. And the limbic association cortex. And I think from my PBL today, I believe you guys went through most of these stuff, especially for anatomy. Okay, so if you want to define the cognition, I was reading this book a long time ago, and I found it as a nice definition when you talk about, when you want to define the cognition. However, there is, in a simple way, the cognition, you can call it also as a mental process involved in gaining the knowledge and the comprehension. So the cognitive processes, it will include thinking, okay, thinking, and your knowledge, and remembering, and you make a judgment, okay, and solving it. So I will mention, and I hope if I forgot, you guys remind me about the when I was in a court in the U.S., I saw an unusual case, and this is related to the cognition, actually, by the way. So let's get it started. Let me make it clear with you guys. I don't ask the questions under research or investigation, okay? Most of the studies has been done on the cognition, has been on the macaque animals or the monkey. What they do their studies, and there's a lot of MRIs to go and track these animals, how is their behavior, how is their reaction or thinking or their decision to make based on the experimental type. What I included in my presentation is just a done deal. Whatever is, everybody, all the doctors and neuroscientists agree on it. So it's not like experimental, okay? Just make it clear with you guys. So because this topic, emotion or cognition, is still under investigation till now, okay, and under research. So if we want to talk about it in the terms of the sequential, the control of the voluntary behavior that often can be divided into 3 main. So you have the stimulus, you have the perception for it, right? And now you have the cognition. Laser pointer, okay, today is red. So this is the cognition, and then you take the action, and then you have the response after that. So you have the stimulus again, you have the perception, you have the cognition, then you want to take an action, okay? So this is a very important, okay? The sequential for that. For this, there is, like we're gonna say it like the association cortex. Maybe you heard about it from the anatomy lectures or other lectures in the neuro block. Okay, this is a very important four types of cortex: the parietal association, the temporal association, the frontal association, and the limbic association. I would really appreciate if you guys know the function of each one of these. It's a very important. It will differentiate both of them. For example, the first one is very important to guide for the motor behavior, the spatial awareness. So the second one, the temporal, the recognition of the sensory stimuli. Why it's important to know this? Because the damage or the sickness or the patient, they suffer for each part of these cortex has a dramatic effect, and it makes you to understand what is going on. Later on, I will talk about it more details, okay? And the limbic one is very famous, the complex function related to emotion and the episodic, and we're going to talk about it when we reach the emotion stage. So, and this, as you can see, I always kind of keep going this, showing this image, because you have the visual part, then it will go toward the dorsal or the ventral one, to the frontal association cortex. You have the temporal association cortex over here. And the clinical observation in human, and also the electrophysiological studies in monkeys, like I said, lead to three general conclusions. Number one is the parietal cortex specialized for the sensory guidance, like I said. Different regions in the parietal cortex serve different functions. So the dorsal part is in the somatosensory cortex, ventral one in the spatial and the perception and the cognition. Third one, you have the temporal association cortex. We're going to go back and talk about this later when we have a dementia patient. I'm going to mention it later on. So, and if we want to talk about these two pathways, like I'm showing here in the slide, the dorsal or the ventral one, okay? You have the dorsal one. You can see like there are some repetition for this information, which is really good for you, help you maybe to understand or let's say memorize it in a good memory to understand the function for those two. For example, in the prefrontal cortex, which is very important when we're going to talk an accident happens in the 18th centuries, 1838, I think, for Phineas Cage. I don't know if you guys hear his story. I read it a long time ago, but I still remember it. And where he had the damage for this part of the area. Interesting story. So, in the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex contribute to the cognitive control of the behavior. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, okay? And we have, yes, Walid, his behavior, personality change. Thank you. Orbital ventromedial prefrontal cortex contributes to the emotion control of the behavior. So these are well known. So the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, cognitive control, the orbital ventromedial prefrontal cortex, see, in my lectures as a physiologist, I'm helping also the anatomy, because there's a lot of anatomy overlapping with the physiology in this case, okay? So it's two in one, like I said. And the limbic association also, it's the gateway to the hippocampal memory system. And you guys remember from yesterday, I hope you remember, let's say, I hope you remember, the guy who had his hippocampus was removed, and the HM, okay, the HM patient. And so he was not able to convert his transient memory, okay, to the explicit memory, because he was missing that one. But he was able to perform a task, for example, drawing that star again and again. After several days, he had a zero error. So if you want to classify that, also, it will be part of his what? Explicit or the implicit? guys don't remember, huh? Okay. Implicit, Sama. Yes, it's implicit. Okay? And it's part of his skills, right? Procedure skills, right? You guys agree about that, right? You're teaching him. And even the next day, when his psychologist, Dr. I think her name, Milner, she has to introduce herself because simply his explicit memory, which is responsible for the facts and the events, is dramatically affected, or let's say it's vanished because of the huge deficit of the memory loss for the explicit one because of the removing the hippocampal part plus the amygdala one. So in this case, they had a patient has a damage to the dorsal medial parietal cortex. If a patient has a damage to this part, okay, they will have a problem to orient their hands, as you can see here. This is the normal one. This is the impaired one. They cannot grasp. They cannot form grasp for this ball, for example. These patients will have a difficulty actually to reach that ball, for example, or the object will place in front of them. Even if you place simply a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, like I saw here, and see that patient, the hand can go to a different location. It's misoriented, and this because of the damage. Let me close this because the point. I close the chat. I have to close the chat. So because of the dorsal medial parietal cortex. So if you see this image, damage of this one, meaning we have an optic ataxia, meaning this guy will have a difficulty. So this patient will not be able to reach for an object that placed in the peripheral visual field, okay? Look, misdirect to reach, misorientation, okay? Another case, when you damage the ventrolateral parietal cortex, okay? When you damage that part, it's it's kind of, let's say, you have a disorder of copying and drawing the results from image. For example, this is the copy model, okay? And this is the patient's copy. When you ask him to draw a bicycle, this is in his vision, in his mind, this is how the bicycle. And this is the face. Look at the face. This is how the hair. When we ask to label it to this is the hair in his vision. This is the eyes. This is the nose, actually, and this is the mouth. Look like the mouth is working for him. Anyhow, so this is because of the ventrolateral parietal cortex damage. So this you will not be able. The patient will not be able to appreciate the structure and the arrangement of the things. But, and this is what I think I'm trying to deliver here. These patients will suffer, like I said, suffering from having the drawing and construction for an image. But like we're gonna see next and the next slide. Let me see if this is the right one. Yeah, the temporal association complex. So remember the damage in this part, ventrolateral parietal cortex. So the temporal association, remember, it's very important for the recognition of sensory stimuli and for storage of semantic knowledge. What does this ring a bell? When you say semantic or event, this part in which type of long-term memory we talked about yesterday? Explicit. You guys awesome. Thank you. So when you have a semantic dementia, okay, the semantic dementia, which is, like I said here, a degenerative disorder typically from the pathology of the temporal cortex. Okay? These patients, the studies of these patients here studied with the disorder indicate the part of the cortex is critical not only for the object recognition, but also for the semantic memory. And we know that from the yesterday lecture. So these people, these patients, okay, if you ask them to draw, for example, an image for a dog or a pig, okay, they have, if you show them an image for a dog or a pig, they cannot distinguish between them because the detail of the knowledge here, like I said in the bold, about things, this is what is missing in these patients. And I've seen, I was reading a report case, just for the sake of this, just very quick, I'm going to mention it. Actually, I think it was in Mayo Clinic. They call it Frontal Temporal Dementia. And these patients, which is a unique case for one of the patients, you can see it actually on YouTube, they have this area are shrinking. The parents were freaking out when they, sorry, it's the same mistake I always do. Oh my God, this is quick. They have this area is, let me close the chat, shrinking. Nobody know why. So the injury to the medioventral region of the temporal cortex, it will have agnosia. This is what I was going to tell you. But my memory, because I have so much stuff going on, not functioning very well, probably. I need some caffeine to kick in. So these patients, this is the test image. If you ask them, the patients with the visual object agnosia, a result of injury, what bold red to medioventral part of the temporal cortex, cannot recognize things but can draw them. You can ask them to draw, they can draw. If you ask them for that image, it said, it could be it's an animal, it could be a dog, it could be a pig. And this one, it could be a wagon. You know what's the wagon? We use it for the kids, just like, or a car, because he can see the wheels, but he cannot make a decision for the details. Okay, let's move in to our story, the Phineas Cage. Okay, so this guy actually is like it's a very famous story. Maybe you heard about it, not from the neuroblock or not from lectures, because sometimes if you are a big fan of the National Geographic or the Science channels, you can see those stories. This guy, he walks to build in the trade for the trains. So I think in the 80s they used to use explosions, not like a powder TNT or something like that, if I'm not wrong. So an explosion happened, and it ended up with this iron or stainless steel, which is like around 1 meter length, going from exactly like this image, 3D. Okay? I think this is his left cheek, so it damaged the bone, went all the way up. So what happened, that guy, before that accident happened, let me give you a brief summary about his behavior. He is very ambitious. He shows up on time all the time. And he is very energetic. He is committed to his work. And what else? They said he never was late to show up to his work. Suddenly, after that accident, everything has been changed. And I've read it, one of the books, actually, very, like I said, nothing happened, there's no accident. Everything happened for a reason, right? So, because of that case, and actually they still keeping his skull in one of the museum. I forgot where, in Washington or DC, maybe. I forgot, but I think they still one of the museum has his skull to show the injury. So this patient with the damage for the prefrontal damage was unable even to travel to their own. Let me remind you about this case I saw in the court in Houston. There was a guy in front of the judge, and do you know what his charges? His charges was urinating in public. He keep urinating in public. I was on a court for a different reason. Somebody stole my apartment, my house. Okay, but I hear the judge. I was there, and I hear the story. He was urinating in public. And if you talk to the guy, he looks like a normal person to me. But I think what the story was behind, he had a car accident before that, because he didn't do this urination in public before, and there was a damage in his frontal lobe. That's what I'm trying to tell you. His behavior changed, and so that's why the emotion and the cognitive process it's very important in the prefrontal cortex, and your behavior is maintained in that part of the brain. So this is why I said here the orbitofrontal ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or the OF, go to the to the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, and then you will go up. Sorry, it disappeared the mouse. So then you go to the premotor cortex, and then finally to the primary motor cortex. And I'm pretty sure you guys had it, how important this primary motor cortex before. Okay? So 3 pathways: OF, DLP, FC to the PM, premotor cortex, to the primary motor cortex. This is the sequential of it. That's all I need you to know about it. Okay? And then for this guy involved in the emotional process associated with the executive control and the behavior. So orbitofrontal and ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Okay, this guy was damaged, this part, and the Phineas cage guy, and this is important also for the cognitive control and of the motor behavior. So there is another case, interesting, when you damage the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, this part specifically. The only way to make a judgment there's a damage in that cortex is by doing something called Wisconsin card sort test. Wisconsin card sort test. So I will show you the video in a minute, okay? So the subject, like I said here, are given to this patient. They are printed, like you have a symbol, 2 stars, 3 plus, or 5, sorry, I cannot even distinguish that. 4 circles, sorry about that. And yes, Sama, you're absolutely. He had a car accident, but I didn't do an MRI, but this is my prediction, okay? They didn't say details, but he had a car accident before. And I think in the court, his parents were complaining about his behavior completely changed after that car accident. So you can make a conclusion there's something going on, right? Compared to our guy's Phineas cage. Anyhow, let's go ahead and continue. So let's go ahead. The patient with the lesions with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, they will continue and persist using unsuccessful strategy, making what is called preservative error. Watch. I hope you can listen to the voice because I'm putting an... Can you listen, guys, to what she's talking about? No? Okay, I will... Okay, hold on just a second.
Can you guys hear?
One of the 4 key cards. Just always take the top card from the deck and place it below the key cards. You think it matches. I cannot tell you how to match the cards, but I will tell you each time whether you are right or wrong. If you are wrong, simply leave the card where you have placed it and try to get the next card correct. There is no test is a little unusual because I am not allowed to tell you very much about how to do it. You will be asked to match each of the cards in these decks to one of the 4 key cards. You must always take the top card from the deck.
I started again, okay?
Below the key cards. You think it matches.
It's working, right?
I cannot tell you how to match the cards, but I will tell you each time whether you are right or wrong. If you are wrong, simply leave the card where you have placed it and try to get the next card correct. There is no time limit on this test. Are you ready? No. Let's begin.
Preservative errors. Preservative errors. Remember, guys, meaning persist to using an unsuccessful strategy, always because of that damage to the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex.
Correct. 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 Wrong.
I think it's
Correct. Correct. Correct.
I think this is enough. The video is freezing. I don't know why. Internet probably issue. But you can see it on the... I uploaded the lecture online. Okay, guys? I'm sorry about that. It's just the internet really slow and it's freezing. See, it's freezing. I'm playing it. So it was clear. Yeah, I know, Sarah. What can I do? It's freezing. So for the sake of the time, so anyhow, this person, she has damage in dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, right? That meaning they call it preservative errors. She's insisting using unsuccessful strategy. It's just like we're not talking about like being a goofy here. It's just like she's a patient and she has a damage to the part of the cortex. So you would really appreciate how the parts of the cortex are really, really important. Okay? So let's talk about the limbic association cortex here. And like I said, this is the emotion part. So again, we've talked yesterday, guys, where is the well-known center of fear and the brain? You guys remember? Amygdala, right? Okay, excellent. So we've talked about an example studied with patients. For example, damaging the prefrontal cortex will has an effect on the social emotion and related feelings. Okay, but what if we talk about patients with damage to some prefrontal cortex? They will not be able to have a good job, which is like Phineas Cage. He lost a job. By the way, after that accident, he doesn't show up to his work, or he show up late. Okay, that's the prefrontal cortex. Now, I just want you to appreciate these parts of the cortex, what they are involved. And I think it's kind of clear, the prefrontal cortex and the other part where you can have you can able to draw, but you cannot distinguish, or you are not able to distinguish between. It depends on which part of the cortex is the damage. It's only 3 cases we have, so it shouldn't be very hard for you guys to know each one of them. I know this is really interesting for you guys and important to know. So let's go ahead, and if we want to define what exactly is an emotion. Unfortunately, the term emotion is confusing, okay? And if you want to refer to physiological responses to certain kind of stimuli, when there's a danger, okay? Your muscle tense and your heart, when you're in danger, your heartbeat will increase, for example, feeling afraid, okay? But it also refers to conscious experience called the feeling, but not always, of course. We need to be distinguish between these 2 cases, okay, or these phases. So for that case, okay, we're gonna talk about a case today, like I mentioned yesterday, mentioning the importance of that amygdala and how it's important for the fear and in a human. So if you guys remember the case the experiment I did yesterday, I didn't do it, but I presented yesterday. For the mouse was listening to that tone or to that music or that sound, and what kind of conditional stimulus we called it, unconditioned or conditioned. Let's see. Conditioned or unconditioned stimulus. The CS, Al-Hanouf. Excellent. It's a condition, right? And what did we say when we have unconditioned stimulus to scare that poor guy? What did we use? We shocked. Excellent, Al-Hanouf. We use a food, we can use shock, but we treated him with a painful shock yesterday. But remember that the pairing is very important, right? There's a difference between unpaired between the 2 stimulus and pairing the 2 stimulus, because this is part of learning, right? And the recording was in the amygdala for that rat or that mouse, okay? It was recorded in the nucleus. And I told you, don't worry about the different types, lateral or central, okay? All you need to know about, and it's in that center of that limbic system, okay? And when we pair them, and then we just introduce that mouse to that music, what's going to happen, which is the conditioned stimulus, yes, Bushra, we will have the reaction of fear, right? This guy is scared now because we paired, remember, we paired that type of a music or that type of sound to the electric shock. And remember, we applied immediately that music before we do it the shock. This is important, the timing, because if you have an experimental question and ask you which one of the following will have the most strongest conditioning, 0% unpaired condition stimulus or 10% 50%, 100%. Which one of the following? 0% unpaired. You guys are doing it in the opposite. 0% unpaired, meaning 100% paired. Yes, Bushra. 0% unpaired. Okay? Meaning 100% paired. Because we are creating pairing between two types of stimulus now and making this guy will be scared from introducing the voice or the sound just by itself without even shocking the mouse. So two important components of the limbic system here, like orbital and medial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. These two telencephalic regions together with the related structure in the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the ventral striatum. And remember, this guy over here is part of the explicit or the implicit memory. Implicit. Excellent, Sarah. Very fast. Which part? What type of what things will be stored here for the implicit long-term memory striatum? Learning a bike, okay? Skills, procedure, right? Excellent. You guys studying. I'm happy. The final is coming soon, so be prepared. So other part of the limbic system, including the hippocampus and other part, like I'm showing here, the mammillary body, the hippocampus, hypothalamus. Okay, let's talk about this case for the sake of the time. I'm almost done. So this is a very interesting published case, okay? The emotional facial reaction, if it's an emotional or voluntary. This patient here, okay, if I'm not wrong, which is, let's see, let me bring up this much bigger. Okay, this woman here, she had a lesion in her left hemisphere. This guy over here, with the kind of weird smile, okay? I think he had a lymphoma, primary lymphoma affected the thalamus, the left thalamus. So when they asked them to give a smile, like a fake smile, this is her reaction, okay? And this is his reaction. But when they saw something really funny, this was her reaction, and this was his reaction. This means, okay, this is what it means. It has two different pathways for both of them to express. Look at these emotions. Emotions, something like it really need different projections of a neuronal pathway to express their emotional smile, if you want to call it. Okay? So, and both of them eventually, they will cause activation of the facial muscle. Okay? But they both have different. This is the neuronal system for emotional expression. Let me pull this down here. This is the voluntary movement. This is emotional facial paralysis. This is the voluntary facial paralysis. But they are two different types of smile because they went through different projections. This is through the medial forebrain, and this is from the motor cortex. But both of them, they want to express their feeling for a smile. Okay, this is interesting cases about how to express your emotions. So the case we had, the last one we had, and I would like to finish with is this patient, and their initial is SM. Okay, remember what I told you yesterday about she had a bilateral calcification atrophy. Okay, and this is the MRI they are showing for that patient. damage to the amygdala, and this damage, it blocked the fear conditioning, okay, which is a really case. So when they asked this patient, and you can see only everything is fine except she's not afraid, and this is a control, okay? This is a control, but this is the patient. She's not afraid, but they insisted. They asked her, they give her a task. Can you draw a happy face? Yes. She no. Sad, disgusted, surprised, angry, but she couldn't draw afraid expression, okay? But when they keep insisting and they were pushing to her, this is what she drew, like a baby. Oh, I'm sorry. And this is what the meaning or the expression of the fear after several failed attempts, of course. Okay? The sketch is standing because she's her expression of the fear, like she's no longer has a sensory, like her, there is no motor sensory impairment, like they said. No, notice there's how can I say it? She's not that person expressing her fear or being afraid of something when she exposed to it. They even did an experiment. We don't have to worry about it, but they exposed objectives in front of normal person, and when they show something scary in front of it, the amygdala will be stimulated, meaning the center of the. She doesn't know what fear look like exactly, guys. So the last example, I think we've talked about yesterday, just to mention it very quickly. They call this the, sorry, oh my God, I'm so sorry about this. Keep happening, the mouse keep changing. So remember, guys, when we talked about the classical conditioning yesterday, right? Why we call it classical conditioning, just to refresh your mind. Why it's classical conditioning? We've talked about yesterday. We have associative learning, non-associative learning, and we said the associative learning is the classical conditioning. Remember? Classical conditioning, because we have two stimulus, conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus. And what did we say about the operant conditioning? Operant. Can somebody say and talk? We have 3 minutes, and then I will finish. It's consequences. That's what you mean, Sama. Behavior, excellent, Al-Hanouf. Reinforcement, Ghadir, bravo. But it can be positive, negative, right? And can somebody give me an example? Just one of these four? Moms? What do you mean? I think everybody, the moms. Interesting. What's wrong with moms, Sama? Bushra, relationship between organisms and consequences. Oh, Bushra, you are copy-paste from my lecture now, huh? I know I wrote that. Like parents. Yeah, what's parents? Parents, what they do? It's, if you have a kid, for example, making a mess, yes? So you ask him, clean up your mess, or you go for time out, right? What type of learning is this? It's going to be operant conditioning, right? Operant. Okay. All right, guys. And I want you to just to know, for this type of conditioning, they call it Pavlovian, which is, I really have a hard time to mention it because it's kind of funny. It's related to the group. They walked and they did the experiment on it. Okay? Pavlovian, classical conditioning, or the classical conditioning, if you mention it, which is, you remember, is this pairing or unpairing? Last thing before we finish. pairing or unpairing for that case? Pavosia, huh? For the Pavosia, what is it? Don't put question mark, Sama or Al Hanuf. Are you asking me? I'm asking you. Yeah, be like Bushra, Lena, and Abdullah. It's pairing, of course. Otherwise, how he is gonna learn? Remember, the unpairing eventually will not be teaching that one. Okay, guys, I have to go. Dr. Ali, I'm pretty sure he's gonna be here in 5 minutes. Feel free. I know it's kind of maybe not that simple, but it's not complicated. The learning, memory, emotion, cognition, they are all connected to each other. If you guys have any problem, any issue, feel free to stop by my office anytime, and we can sit down and talk about these slides. Okay? I wish you all the best. Inshallah, you're going to be fine in the final, inshallah. Okay? Thank you so much, and all the best. Assalamu alaikum.